Right, it's just a quick overview of how to answer the question 3B questions in the Weimar and Nazi Germany GCSE history exam. First thing you can see from this overview slide is that question 3B and 3C and 3D are all interpretations questions. So it's really important that we're looking at those interpretations rather than the sources for these questions. For question 3C, you can use both, but I'll explain that in a separate video. But certainly for question 3B, it's making sure you've just got those interpretations and you're reading the right things. So for question 3B, you're asked to look at those two interpretations. It tells you they give different views about whatever the topic is of question 3. Remember, question 3 is all about the same aspect of the GCSE Germany course. And so it asks you, what is the main difference between those views? And it says to explain your answer using details from both interpretations. So the first thing to do is to carefully read the two interpretations. They will have different views about the particular topic. They have different interpretations about that issue. The example in your formative assessment booklet is all about Nazi policies towards women. The first interpretation, for example, in that case gives you a suggestion that actually the Nazi policies weren't very successful and women remained in work, whereas the second interpretation suggests that actually Nazi policies were quite successful and women did leave work. So you've got different viewpoints and different ideas. So to answer this, it's nice and straightforward. You just need to identify what the key differences in their views. Try not to just focus on the difference in fact or detail, but the difference in their overall views. Once you've done that, once you've identified the main difference, all you have to do in order to get all 4 marks is to make sure you back up your point with a quote from each of the interpretations. And we've got an example at the bottom of how you might write that. It says interpretation 1 suggests X. For example, in our example, it might be suggest that the Nazi policies were not very successful towards women. For example, it states, and you put a quote which shows that, and then you say, whereas interpretation 2 suggests something else. In the formative assessment examples, you might say the Nazi policies were quite successful. For example, it states, and you put a quote. So it's literally interpretation 1 suggests this, here's a quote, whereas interpretation 2 suggests this, and here's a quote. And you've just basically picked out the different views and proved it with a quote from each one. And that's it, that's all you have to do. So it's only worth 4 marks, so it's not a huge question. So it's a case of having a read those sources carefully, deciding the difference, jotting them down and putting a quote from each one. And that's nice and straightforward. Okay, thank you very much.